In Pep Guardiola and Manchester City's first Premier League game back, Pep Guardiola unleashed a tactic that we have never seen from him before, and that's using the long ball. Manchester City and Guardiola used the long ball effectively to beat Burnley 3-0 in their first game of the season, but I think there's a reason we're going to be seeing a whole lot more of this long ball from Man City this season and from a lot of other Premier League teams. In Pep's post-game interview, he talks a little bit more on why he decided to use the long ball against Burnley.
Edison played the ball over the top a lot tonight. Is that just for the specific opponent, or is that something?
When you play teams against man-to-man, the man free is the keeper. So that's why you have to use this alternative, and the opponents want to face one against Erling or Julian, and all the spaces, all the length of the pitch behind in the length. Okay, you accept it. If Erling is able to win that ball, it's one against the keeper. So, and we with this type of quality keepers, Stefan have incredible long ball, and the quality like a striker you have with Erling and Julian is another weapon we have to use.
So to understand more clearly why Pep resorted to the long ball against Burnley, we're going to have to look at their out of possession shape. Out of possession is merely their defensive structure when they are out of possession and trying to win it back. So Burnley were playing a high line against Manchester City, and the clip starts with Ederson trying to find Walker outside and build up from the back. But once Walker receives the ball, you can see the Burnley press is just starting. As Walker controls the ball and tries to play it back to the center back Akanji, you could see all the Burnley players moving up in this press to try and win the ball back. You could see this press kind of takes on a man-to-man structure as the Burnley players are trying to mark the Manchester City players in the build-up 1-for-1. And once the ball gets back to Ederson, you can see just how tight the Burnley players are and how high up the field this man-to-man press from Burnley is. So once Ederson plays a dangerous ball into Rico Lewis in the middle, he finds Ake on the outside, and Ake has no choice but to play it out wide because he has no options because this Burnley press is so tight. And if we watch the sequence again, Burnley is the black dots, and you can see just how aggressive their press gets once the ball gets back to Ake, number 3 here, and you can see just how high up the field these players get and how aggressive their man-to-man press is. So a big part of understanding how to beat a man-to-man press like Burnley's is to understand the pressing triggers. A trigger is what's going to start the whole team to push up and initiate the press. Pep saw that Burnley's trigger was passing to the outside. You can see that once Ake receives the ball, all the Burnley players press up and they're suddenly 1v1 and man-to-man on the Manchester City players. Ake is forced to play the ball back to Ederson just due to how intense the Burnley press is. You can see once it gets back to him, he has no choice but to go long. And if we watch that back again, if you watch the Burnley players, you can see just how quickly they push up once Ake receives the ball outside and passes it back to Ederson. You can tell that that pass outside to Ake is their pressing trigger as all of them push up together in this man-to-man press. You could even see at parts during the first half how Burnley tried to initiate this press by forcing passes outside just to initiate their pressing triggers for the whole team to press up together and try and win the ball back. You can see that the player is forcing Ederson to play outside towards Ake, with the other Burnley players ready for that pass, anticipating it, and then going to press up together man-to-man. So in this case, Ederson bypasses Ake and goes to Foden on the outside, but you can see that even once he receives it on the outside, it's 4v3 and he has players collapsing on him from all sides, and he loses the ball, of course. He doesn't have a good passing option, with how intense this Burnley press is. And if you watched the first half, you probably noticed Ederson was holding the ball a lot in the back line. He didn't really have any good passing options to build out through the middle or through the outside because he knew if he played it to the outside, the Burnley press was going to come in, and he could tell that the Burnley players were trying to force him to make that pass towards the outside. This is why during the first half, Burnley's press was pretty successful against Manchester City, forcing them to make dangerous passes through the middle if they wanted to try and progress the ball, on the ground through the middle in their standard build-up. But this is where Pep also saw an opportunity in the first half to take advantage of those long balls. If we look at Manchester City's in-possession structure, you can see that Ederson was kind of joining the back line as a third center back. He was pushed up so high that he was able to take one of the offensive markers away from his outfield players. And then you have Ake and Walker, who, because Ederson is in the center back position, they're able to push up high and out wide like regular fullbacks, but they have an added player in the middle, which makes it a little bit harder for the Burnley press to account for guarding them and guarding Ederson at the same time. You can see that when Walker specifically was pushed up, it forced Burnley's left back Vitinho to push up on him and mark him. Because when your team is playing such a man-to-man high press, Burnley's forced to push up their left back in order to guard Walker on the outside so that he's not a free option for Manchester City just to easily break the press. But what this heavy man-to-man press by Burnley does is it actually leaves 1v1s up top for City's forwards. That's why you can see Haaland in a 1v1 up top, Rico Lewis in a 1v1 up top, Foden has a 1v1, and also Alvarez has a 1v1 on the outside. So that's what Pep Guardiola realized during the first half. He saw that Burnley was going to press in this man-to-man system, and he wanted to take advantage of it because they were doing a really good job at preventing their normal build-up. So what he realized was that Haaland is kept in a 1v1 up top, Foden is in a 1v1 up top, and both of them are in 1v1s with center backs. I mean, when you throw the ball long to Haaland in a 1v1, all he has to do is beat one guy and then he's through on goal, or he could hold up the play for Foden, who's able to easily separate from his center back man mark. And what Pep noticed from some of these long balls that Ederson was forced to play was that once he played it up to Haaland in a 1v1, City were immediately on the attack if he got a good touch on the ball, or he was able to lay it off to Foden or Alvarez running in behind. So you can see this structure with having Ederson as the third center back forces the right back and the left back from Burnley to press extremely high up if the whole team wants to keep this man-to-man high press and their out of possession system going. So it was really in the second half where we saw that Pep definitely emphasized this in the locker room, because a lot of the Manchester City players were trying to isolate Haaland up top in this 1v1 situation. You saw Foden dropping in, Walker dropping, and all of their midfielders dropping more towards Ederson, so that they left one center back on Haaland up top. And once Haaland is isolated and gets a ball, and like Pep said, if he gets one touch in behind, he's through and he's going to score a goal. So that's what Pep was definitely looking at. He wanted to keep Haaland isolated up top because it was leading to easy attacks. Again, in the second half, you can see how Walker and Ake are much more flat and dropped in than they were in the first half. This is to bring the Burnley's left back and right back higher up the pitch, so it keeps Foden and Haaland more isolated up top. Foden is able to isolate himself and receive a long ball easily from Ederson. Just because of how far out Walker dragged Burnley's left back, he's not able to recover in time and beat Foden to the ball. This leads to one of City's more dangerous attacks of the game, as Foden is able to hit it into Haaland, who's able to run in behind, just because Foden received in so much space with that long ball. From another angle, you can see that Vitinho is dragged out of position and he's over towards the left side looking to press Walker when he receives the ball, but he should be more central, supporting his center back, and Foden is able to separate from his marker, receive the ball, and City had a 3v3 in behind just with Foden's one touch off that Ederson long ball. And you might be wondering why we'll see more of this from City. Well, this man-to-man hybrid pressing system that we're seeing from Burnley in this game is actually what City do in their out-of-possession structure. It's really popular with Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, and with Arsenal and Mikel Arteta. We saw this from Arsenal, we see this from De Zerbi at Brighton, and we see a lot of this from Eddie Howe at Newcastle. So that's why I think a lot more teams are going to be adopting this over-the-top presence, especially if they have good forwards up top who are able to separate, and they have good ball-playing keepers, like David Raya at Arsenal and Steele at Brighton. So we saw Pep get a little unorthodox in his first game back in this Premier League season. But I think we'll be seeing a whole lot more of this long ball from Pep and other Premier League teams in the upcoming weeks. Just make sure to keep an eye out for it.